So welcome to Sound for Picture Part 2. This is the application portion of our discussion. So this is tools and techniques to get the most from the least. It was impressed upon me very, very deeply that apparently those of you who are looking to make films over the course of the next year don't have multi-million-dollar budgets, which is a shame. So we're going to talk about some things that the pros use, but then also we're going to spend some time talking about what inexpensive or possibly even free options are, because that's the best way to do it anyway. There's no reason to spend money if you don't need to. For those of you just joining us, my name is Keith Giosa. I'm a musician, composer, engineer, sound designer. Those of you that watched this first part, I apologize. You have to go through all these pictures of me again. I've been a musician for a little more than 2 decades. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, and I'm a performing and a recording session musician. I've been composing for most of my life, including TV pilots and several short films. I'm waiting for that first mega feature film to come my way. If you guys know anybody, please send them to me. I don't even want to pretend to think I can say your name, but there was a question, what was the first session about? I'm going to go over that in a second so that you know. I've also worked for many, many years as an engineer, mostly in recording studios, helping people make their first record or second record or so on and so forth. I also do artist development, production, all sorts of stuff. And then most recently, I've started working as a sound designer. I'm a partner with the company Red Flight Pictures out of Philadelphia. We are a small independent filmmaking company. I was originally brought on as a staff composer, but have moved on to become one of the producers, as well as, if you look at my email, it says Keith Giosa, sound department, because it was just the easiest way to just say that I pretty much do whatever gets thrown in my lap. So while audio work is something I've done for a long time, sound designing and sound mixing for film is relatively new the past few years. So that's why I feel like I should be the guy talking about it, because it's so fresh that hopefully I don't gloss over the things that I take for granted. So what we covered in the first half. We talked about the basics of sound for film. We're going to revisit this in much deeper detail. We talked about the basics of sound being dialogue, sound effects, and music. And we went into some detail. We talked a good bit about the history, how, when, and why sound was added to picture. It was a really, really brief history. At the end of this, as you'll see, I'm going to share a ton of resources. Definitely dig into them and try, if you're interested in this, learn more about the history of film and the integration of sound and how all of it came to be what it is today. You wouldn't have gigantic Marvel movies that look and sound the way they do if it wasn't for what came before them. We did something called What's Wrong with This Picture? This was the portion of my presentation where none of my equipment worked, and it was great. We were all patient, and we finally got it to work. But we looked at an early version of a clip from one of the films that I worked on where the audio was just all sorts of wrong, and then showed a portion of what that final clip ended up looking and sounding like. And then we just did a little bit of Q&A. So I'm going to try and get through this content a little bit faster so that we can have a little bit, have a good deal more time with Q&A than we did with the last session. And let's see if I can hit some of those last minute questions too. So think about your questions. You can drop questions in chat. And if you think there's a reason I should stop and address something, please let me know. So what we're going to cover over the next several minutes, Talk to Talk is going to be really looking at specifically what kind of equipment we use when we talk about sound for film. So that is hardware equipment as well as some of the software equipment. And it's, for one, just so you can see multiple levels of what gets used, all the way from those just starting off all the way through what the professionals use. And just so you can understand, speak the language a little bit more. One of the things I mentioned in the last session was that the more we speak the same vocabulary, the faster and more efficiently we get work done. So it's really important. Just like in music, everybody's got to know how the scale works. It has to know the notes. Walk the walk. So we're going to take all the stuff from the previous section and actually make it apply to those of us that don't have money. And how can you do it? Like, money should never be the reason you don't do something. Passion and desire should always go past that. And one of my favorite sayings is that necessity is the mother of invention. So when you don't have, you make. And I'm going to share a ton of resources and a Q&A. So if everybody's ready, let's talk a little bit. So we're going to talk about the devices we use to capture sound in connection with film specifically. So some of these devices can be used in all sorts of manner. I know I've had a few questions, not just today, but even before these sessions come my way about folks asking about podcasts. A lot of this equipment applies to that as well. And some of it applies even to recording music and other forms of audio. So we were talking a little bit about this gentleman at the end of the last session. Ben Burtt, an award-winning sound engineer, did the sound for every Star Wars movie. And you kind of get from the picture, you can see what he was working with back. And this picture is probably from the early 70s. This is going way back. He's probably still in college when that picture was taken. I like those sneakers. See, I can't read this because there's something in my way. Here we go. Sorry. Most sound work in films is done very quickly and at the end of the schedule, where it's just jammed together and you always wish you had more sympathy. So this speaks very much to the film process. Everybody that works on a film, from the director of photography, the producers, the executive producer, all the sound people, all the visual effects people, everybody's most concerned about the job that they have to do. So the folks that are working from the beginning, by the time it gets into post-production, when everything's shot and we're now editing, we're adding stuff on the back end, they're typically so tired of the film and the process that they just want you to hurry up and get it done because they want that process to be done. And also, timelines keep getting pushed out. Timelines are built on what the ideal is. You know, we can shoot this film in 4 weeks and it tends to be 4.5 or 5 weeks, which is now cutting into your time. So he's just saying that my job's at the end, and I wish people had a little bit more sympathy for the work that I do, because he takes it very seriously and always goes above and beyond. When he worked on Star Wars, they thought the 20th Century Fox thought he was out of his mind with how much time and money he spent. So. Okay. So the components we discussed in the first half. So dialogue, what kind of dialogue do we have? There's production dialogue, which is dialogue that is captured on set with microphones in some place on the set, out of camera, that are picking those things up in the moment. We have a performance, just like a stage performance for a play. We want that performance to be genuine, and we want to capture it in every possible way. The camera needs to get the video portion of it with the correct lighting. We want to get all of that and set dressing and all those fundamentals, but we also want to get the real performance of the dialogue. When those things don't necessarily go as planned, we have something called automatic dialogue replacement. That's where the director brings in those actors into a studio, a controlled space, and they have them reread their lines, but also trying to lip sync to the performance that was chosen for the edit.
Isn't ADR basically like a music video, for like an example? You know, like how they be syncing the music with like when they be filming it?
Oh yeah, it's the same idea. It's exactly right. In fact, except that it's in reverse, right? So when you're syncing to a music video, everything's already done. The song is done. It's mixed. It's mastered. It's ready for release. That's played on speakers on set, and then the talent lip syncs to that to get the shape of their mouth right. ADR is actually the exact opposite. So they had a performance and it had audio to it. In the studio, they take the dialogue out and they make the actor redo it, but try and match the tempo and everything so that when you hear this new recording, it doesn't look weird to what's on screen.
So like kind of like animations.
Yes.
Got you.
Yeah. Although, you know what? I got to back that one up too, because animation's usually animated to the dialogue already recorded. But animation has ADR also. So they'll have the voice talent come in, record all their lines. The animators animate to it to make the mouths look like what they're saying. And then sometimes they need to recapture one of those lines, which means now the voice actor is now watching their character on screen and trying to match the lips that the animators did so that the animators don't have to go back and fix it. So this is all about replacing something that had already been there. And then the third is voiceover. Voiceover is recording voice in that same controlled studio environment, but it's for dialogue that is heard and not seen. So this is for narrating. This is for somebody speaking over a radio. It could be an announcer at a game, something like that. Next section was sound effects, production sound. Again, you're going to have a guy on set, some person on set with a microphone trying to capture as much footsteps, door opening, door shutting, all those things as much, because it's real. It's not movie real, but at least it gets you a good bit of the way towards where you're trying to get. When production sound doesn't make it over the finish line to how big we need for movies to be, we bring in Foley. So we're going to talk more deeply about all of these items. Foley, really briefly, is a craft where the artists will use everyday items to recreate the sound of something. So, you know, like the sound of a bone crushing is not somebody with a bone in front of a microphone cracking it into pieces. It's typically things like eggshells and other brittle things to make it sound worse than it is. So that's Foley. Also done in a very controlled studio environment. And the last sound effect is ambient. This is the thing that typically gets the least attention, but is the most missed when it's not there. What does the room sound like? What does it sound like to be by the ocean? If you saw a film and the scene is shot in front of an ocean and you didn't hear waves in the background, your brain's going to start getting really sad. Doesn't compute, right? So we need those ambient sounds. And then for music, to wrap it up, there's score, which is written specifically for the music or for the film to reflect the emotions that the director and the rest of the creative team feel need to be conveyed in a way that only music can. And then there's soundtrack. Soundtrack really typically refers to music that's placed in a film that had already existed. So again, we'll talk about all of these in more depth. So dialogue for production sound. This is proof, as much as I hate to admit it, I am from time to time a boom operator on set. It's as fun and as grueling as you probably think it is to hold what could sometimes be a 7-foot pole with a microphone at the end of it, with your arms fully extended over your hands for like long periods of time. But it's really rewarding because you can hear every sound in the room before everybody else can. So production sound, we're going to capture that dialogue. You can see I'm holding a boom microphone in my hand. The whole point of that is to be able to get it as close to the actors, pick up their dialogue and make it sound like we're in the room with them while also keeping that microphone out of frame. So here's our buddy Ben Bird again. Anybody that likes Star Wars, I use Star Wars as an example quite a bit just because it's just from a sound effects and sound design standpoint, it completely created a new class of films. So we can see him, he was recording baby bear or bear cub sound effects, and that was one of the sounds layered into the sound of Chewbacca. So here he is at a zoo, and this picture is specifically to compare and contrast. So you figure the picture of him is probably 1976, 1977. He's got a short boom arm. He has the microphone that would typically sit on the end of it. He's wearing this thing around his shoulder called a field recorder. That's what it looked like 40 some years ago. And then in the top right-hand corner, that's what it looks like today, at least one version of it. And you can see from the picture, so the pole looks essentially the same. I'm sure the pole in the top picture goes much further than his did. I'm sure the pole in the top right-hand corner is probably also made out of something like carbon fiber, so that it's a little bit lighter, because every ounce counts. Ooh, that rhymes. I gotta make a T-shirt with that. We see similar type of microphone at the top, pair of headphones, same idea, much smaller, and that field recorder is way smaller. And then at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see here's a series of field recorders. If field recorders have any interest for you, the one all the way to the very far right, that smallest zoom, those things are relatively inexpensive. They're not the best for film because it's 2 microphones and it's supposed to capture in stereo and sound really big. When we're trying to capture dialogue, we want it to be close. But it's a really good way to get entry into this type of capturing audio. And all the way up to the top ones, I guess in this case, bigger might be better. Each one of these starts adding more and more features and more inputs for more microphones. So when you're on set, you have a series of microphones. One is the boom microphone. There's also going to be microphones mounted to the actors. There's going to be microphones hidden in things like plants and other stuff that's off camera that you can't see, but is there to collect everything. More is always better in this case. If for some reason one of these microphones fails, you want to know you always have a backup, because ADR should always be the last thing that we go for. If I don't have to do ADR, I don't want to have to. So these are multi-recorders. They can, you can see, let's see, the second one from the left and the third one from the left, both of those record, it looks like 8 microphones at one time. So, and it records them separately. So when you take them out of the box, you have 8 separate recordings. So this is a voiceover session that I did at my studio just a few years ago with one of our, he was the actor in the film. We had him do narration for the film. The great part about this is, as I was saying in the last one, there's something called a lock edit, which in my mind, lock equals lie. When the director tells you that the film is in a lock, they are saying this film will not see any more edits, and it's never the case. There's always 1 or 2 more edits. So it was decided really late in the game. This is probably 3 weeks before the film premiered, if even that. It was decided to add a voiceover narration for the beginning and the end of the film. So this was the main actor, who also incidentally works as a voice actor. The guy's got a brilliant voice. Okay, so production sound. I apologize. When I was building this, I was running out of pictures, so there's a lot of me in this. So don't let it discourage you. So this was a recent film set that we were on just a few weeks ago. So this is one of those situations where there's no dialogue here. This is just our main actor running through tall grass. You can see our director of photography is running alongside her, and you can see me running in front of him. And if you're thinking, wow, that looks like he's going to fall on his back, you are absolutely right. I took such a digger on that. There is video. I don't think it's on social media. It is pretty great though. But in this case, I'd rather try and get the sounds than having to try and recreate it, make it sound realistic. So this is sound effects captured on set. Some of the things that I was doing with the boom mic was when everybody was off set and it was completely quiet, I walked around the set and captured my own footsteps. I walked around out in the woods, captured my own footsteps through grass, through gravel, everything, because I wanted it to be as true to the area where we were. Now, if those don't work, I can pull sounds from other places, but I'm always going to try and capture as much as I can. And this is typical workflow for somebody who does production sound. There's also ambient. I did a lot of that too. I was, as all these actors were working their way into the woods, I actually walked right past them and I went to where nobody was, and I was capturing wind, wind going through grass, wind going through trees, capturing all these things, labeling them, and making sure I could get to them later. Again, I can go on Google and Google, wind sounds, but I always think that this is going to be far more authentic.
Yeah, because you wanted like natural sound and you wanted to get it like, basic sounds. It's better to like get your own stuff than to take it. I know what you mean.
Absolutely. And think about it. I mean, I have a massive library of sound effects, of ambient sounds and Foley sounds and all that stuff. I got to search through that list and find the one. Now, if I do wind, I may come up with 30, 40, 50 wind sounds. How do I figure out which one's the best? So I have to listen to all of them, and that's all time. So capturing on set is always going to be the fastest way. And then, hope and pray that it turns out as good as you hear in the headphones. So Foley is the next. Foley is the reproduction of everyday sound effects that are added to films, videos, and other media in post-production. So the film is done. This is added at the end to enhance audio quality. They're reproduced sounds, oftentimes not by the actual things that cause those sounds. Like I said, eggshells for bone cracking. They do it a lot. Now, in the case of the picture to the left, you can see there, even though on set there was probably the sound of somebody pouring water into a glass or some kind of a liquid into a glass, but you can see, look at the proximity to the microphone. That microphone is picking up every single detail, and that gives the sound mixer the ability to really decide how upfront or how in the background that sound is going to be. So Foley's named after a sound effects artist from early on in film history named Jack Foley. And it can be anything from swishing of clothing, footsteps, squeaky doors, breaking glass. Foley sounds are used to enhance the auditory experience of a movie. Foley sounds are placed all over the spectrum, not just in the center. They can be placed anywhere, left or right, or if you're working in surround sound, they can be placed behind. Same with ambient sounds. Ambient sounds tend to be off to the sides and in the back in surround sound. But Foley is a way to recreate real life sounds and make the audience feel like they're experiencing the thing that the actor is experiencing. So this just makes me happy. This is really cool. I've never worked on Foley at this scale. I have some friends that do on the East Coast as well as LA, and they have sound stages that look just like this. I love it. The most fun part of being a Foley artist has to be the fact that you get to go to garage sales and yard sales every week and just find stuff that makes cool sounds. It could just be like somebody selling a chain for $2 and that chain sounds really good, so they're going to grab it. So the interesting things to note in here, you have a sandbox that actually does have sand in it, and then other sandboxes that have hay and grass, gravel, stones, brick. There's a wooden door on the floor, probably to simulate somebody probably walks over that with different types of shoes to get the sound of footsteps. When they record it live while the film is playing back, and they learn what happened in the scene, and they reproduce it. And what's really interesting is you may only see somebody in a medium shot, so just their torso up to the top of their head, and they're walking across the screen. Somebody somewhere is walking in the same type of shoes to make that sound in the background. It's probably buried, but it's there. Ambient sound effects. So we already kind of covered this. This we can kind of blow right past, but yeah, this is what you do. You have to be the guy all the way, the person out on your own, nobody around, and you're literally just capturing the sound of nothing. And it makes all the difference. There's two other things that happen when it comes to ambient sounds when you're on set. There's something called a room sound, which is everyone on set during that scene being filmed needs to stop what they're doing and stand or sit completely still while the production sound engineer captures 30 seconds to 60 seconds of what's called room sound. So if you've ever listened to, if you listen to a recording and you hear whatever it happens to be, it could be from your phone, you hear that recording and you only really notice that it could be somebody talking or music playing or something in the background. And it's only when the recording stops that you realize that there was all this noise in the background.
Oh, like so Quiet Place, John? Like the movie The Quiet Place?
Yes, exactly right. So in a movie like The Quiet Place, I need to make sure the audience knows what that room sounds like at all times. And then what happens is the dialogue comes up and that dialogue has room noise in it. And when the dialogue is edited down and cut off at the end, I don't want the sound of that room to stop. I need room noise to fill that in. So we capture what's called room sound. We also, we go out into the wild, we capture sounds of whatever space we're going to be in. Like I said, we already kind of covered that. So that's ambient sound. And then the last piece is music. So scored music means the director brought on someone as a composer, shows them the film, and says, these are the emotions I'm trying to convey in the film, and I need your music to help me accomplish that. And they do what's called a spotting session, which is where they sit in a room together. Typically, it's typically the composer's studio, and they watch the film together. And from there, the director says, these are the exact places where I need music. This is where I need it to stop. And this is the emotion of the scene. Most often, directors don't speak the musical language, so they're going to speak in really broad, sweeping, almost poetic terms of what the emotion of it is. So so you create that music. You often get notes and turn down and feedback, and you refine. It's really important not to treat any of this stuff as your baby, because you're always invariably going to get some kind of feedback that says it needs to be changed somehow. So once it all gets passed, somebody like this is Hans Zimmer working on Pirates of the Caribbean. Now you can see he's in front of an orchestra. It's probably an 80-piece orchestra. In order to get to this place, he had to do something called a mock-up. So a mock-up is when you create a piece of music that is completely synthetic. This is synthesizer sounds and sounds that are supposed to sound like an orchestra and any other instruments that are involved. Someone like Hans Zimmer is also a multi-instrumentalist, so if it needs guitar, he's probably playing guitar on it, things like that. And this mock-up needs to sound as realistic as possible so it doesn't take the director out, and the director can approve the music. And then it gets to the point of where people make the sheet music of it, gets handed out to the orchestra who's been hired, and you record it. Just to give you an idea, there's a lot of work that goes into these mock-ups. And for someone like myself that works on low budget and independent films, this isn't a mock-up to get approval from the director. This is probably the final thing. So we need to make this sound as realistic as possible so as not to take the audience out.
So it's kind of like adding music to a game or similar to that.
It is exactly the same. It is exactly the same. The biggest difference between film audio and game audio, and that's all three of those things, right? So it's dialogue, sound effects, and music. The biggest distinction is I'm going to do all of those things in a film so that they patch together in chronological order. Games don't work that way. Game is choose your own adventure, or you're not very good at this game, so you got to go back to the beginning. But all the dialogue is recorded in tiny chunks so that it changes based on the decisions you make as the gamer. All the music changes based on the decisions you make as a gamer. So the volume of work that needs to be done of sound is gigantic, because the programmers, the developers for those games want to be able to choose from all of these items. But you're absolutely right. The process is the same. Every portion of a game has an emotion. Whether it's to scare the life out of the player, or if it's to make you feel calm for some reason so that it can scare you right after that. The game director is going to walk a composer through those same things to build those emotions. So yeah, spot on. A lot of film composers go on to be game composers too, because man, there's a ton of work out there. So really good film scores. I know this is a shocker.
You got the classic up there.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest film scores. In fact, these three films that I'm going to showcase here for scores, these are the American Film Institute's top 100. These are the top 3. Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia. If you haven't seen any of them, you should go watch them, and then watch them a second time with your eyes closed and listen to the music. They're immense. And each one of these, Lawrence of Arabia is kind of even Gone with the Wind and Lawrence of Arabia are slightly oddball in this place, because everything about these films was kind of manufactured to be the biggest thing anybody's ever seen and ever heard. So take that with a grain of salt, but they're absolutely worth watching. They're great films. I was forced to watch Lawrence of Arabia in high school, and I was so happy. I went out and bought it right after. That was a good class.
What is it? What are they both about though? The movies.
Gone with the Wind is about two people that live on a plantation in the South, pre-Civil War, I believe, or during the Civil War. You could see it looks like they like each other a little bit, so there's probably a little bit of romance between them. And then, as you can tell from the poster, there's some pretty horrific events that happen in the meantime. But it's definitely about the relationship between those two characters. And then Lawrence of Arabia, it's been so long since I've seen it, is about an Englishman who ends up in the Arabian desert. It's a really long film. But when you consider, man, I wish I could remember what year that came out. You'd have to look it up. This is a pretty old film. When you consider how old it is and how amazing it looks, it makes you feel like you're out in the desert with them. Make you thirsty. But also remember, you're asking what they're about. The storytelling from this era is very different than what we're used to now. They're long, and the plot development takes much longer. So music can also be a soundtrack. They choose not to use a composer, and they choose to use placed music. Music's like, films like The Graduate, Pulp Fiction, Garden State. These are all films where the directors worked with the editor and the sound team to the music department to specifically find songs that fit the emotion of a scene. And all three of these examples use songs with vocals in them. So it's a completely different approach. All right, so I'm going to blast through this just for the sake of time. I want to see if we can get through this in the next maybe 5 minutes or so. And I will probably just make resources available so you guys can get it offline rather than spending too much time discussing it, because I want to get to your questions. So microphones. This is a really quick portion of this part. This is called a ribbon microphone. This is just for the historical part of it. This is a type of microphone that uses a really thin piece of aluminum or film that is magnetically and electrically conductive, and it's placed between two magnets. This is a really old style of microphone. They're terribly fragile. Even when they were new, they were fragile. They tend to have a really dark tone, but this was the microphone of choice back in the 10s, the 20s, and the 30s. What other type of microphones are there? All right, so I'm gonna see if I can stop sharing my screen. All right, can everybody see me? All right, so what kind of other microphones do we have? We have microphones called dynamic mics. If these look familiar to you, they should. This is microphone 101 right here.
Yeah, that's like the ones they used to like sing or like to use like in churches and stuff.
Absolutely. This thing's been around since the 60s. Not this particular one, although I wouldn't be surprised. These are both made by a company called Shure. It's the only microphone company that I'm aware of that has a robot whose only job is to pick the mic up and drop it repeatedly from 6 feet. And these things don't break. Could also be used to defend yourself. That's a different class. All right, so dynamic microphone. So this works in the same principle as a ribbon microphone in that there's no electricity in here. It's a diaphragm, just like an eardrum, that moves with the air, and it's between two magnets. That movement between the magnets creates electricity. Electricity goes down the cable, gets interpreted by something. Could be a PA system, could be a computer, gets interpreted into sound. This is the same exact mic, just happens to have this thing on it, a spit shield. But if I take this off, we can see there's the diaphragm in the center, and the ring around it is the magnet. Different shape, slightly different sound, just as indestructible. This microphone's been places. So this is a dynamic mic. This is probably the least expensive path to get into microphones if you're looking for a microphone. You don't have to go with this. I have some options I'm going to share in a little bit. You don't have to go with this one, but this still starts at like less than $100. This is really cheap in the world of music. The next type of microphone is called a condenser microphone. I have a couple different examples. So condenser microphone changes from the fact that the other microphones weren't powered. These are powered. This is what's called a small diaphragm condenser. This is called a large diaphragm condenser. Wonder why?
I'm trying to get one of those. I have the first one that you were showing us. I have one of those. I'm using it right now. I'm trying to get the second one. That one, yeah. Okay,
so this is called a small diaphragm condenser. They both function the same way. They have to have 48 volts to work. So we're actually sending power to that eardrum that's in here. This is a good place to start. These are really good for getting into small places. That's the whole reason it's designed like this. I want to get it close to a guitar. On set, I take these guys, I have 2 of them. I hide these in plants. I do all kinds of stuff. Make sure it's out of camera. This, I'm not going to use this on set. That's a little ludicrous. Just to show you another version. This is called a lollipop style condenser microphone. So the big difference is as soon as you add electricity to the conversation, these are far more sensitive. Now the difference is I'm not going to put one of these near the muffler of a car to get the sound of a car. I'll probably put one of these, especially because if they back up, I'm not too worried about it. But this can take high sound pressure. These can't. These will distort. And when we talk about microphones, it's really important to remember we want volume levels that are in the middle and good. We don't want distortion because you can't get rid of it. It's not possible. And you don't want so quiet that when you go to turn the volume up, you get hiss, right? It's called noise floor. So these guys, really sensitive, don't tend to have a loud sound noise floor, but not good for dangerous situations or situations where the sound's going to be really loud. But remember, condenser microphone means it has power being supplied to it, because we're going to revisit that. The next is called a lavalier. It's a wireless lavalier. So you can see this guy's tiny. A lot of times they have little clips on them. If you ever watch, like TV personalities, it's usually sticking out of their button-up shirt. This is actually a flat piece of plastic for taping directly either to their clothing or sometimes directly to the actor. Acting's not always fun, especially if you're hairy like me. It's even worse when you have to pull the tape off and you see what happens. It's gross. That usually connects to something like this. This is a wireless receiver. I'm sorry, wireless transmitter. The receiver's on the other end. So this is great. This is a really sensitive microphone. It's going to be here. Picks up everything right here beautifully, almost too beautifully. It's going to almost sound too close and not realistic. I use these as a backup. Not really necessary. They're also really expensive. So it's a good backup if you need it, but it's not necessary. And also realize that if they talk this way, you've lost them. So there's some disadvantages to this. And then the last one, this is the one everybody hates. Stop telling me about boom mics. So this is a boom mic rig, but more importantly, the microphone I have on here, this is called a shotgun microphone. You can see really, really narrow. Most of it is picked up on the very end. As you work your way towards the sides, it becomes less sensitive. It's designed to do that. So this is a condenser microphone. So it has to have power. It takes a AA battery, or if you have a recorder that can put out 48 volts, it's called phantom power. You can power this thing that way and never have to use a battery for it. Extremely sensitive. When you're using this, you don't want to hear. It's going to be above, out of camera, so you can see the microphone isn't in view. But when I'm pointing it somewhere between their sternum and their chin. I want to get in here. And one of the things I'm going to use on that is this guy, because as each actor is talking, I'm going to point it towards them and to them. And that little bit of movement's enough to pick up wind. So that foam on the end is going to keep that sound from it's going to keep it out of the microphone. But that's not all, ladies and gentlemen. We have this guy. I'm not going to kill myself putting this on, but this is called the Zeppelin. So anytime you're in a space with wind, you're going to use the Zeppelin. This is going to cut down on that wind noise. Especially if I'm outside trying to get that ambient sound, I want the sound of the wind around me, not going into the microphone. Have you ever heard somebody blow into a microphone? It's horrible, right? I don't want that, but I want the sound that the wind makes in the atmosphere. Now, if it's really windy, I break out my dead cat. You guys laugh. This is literally called a dead cat. So this goes over the Zeppelin, cuts the wind down even more. This is a last ditch. I try not to use it because this is also going to take a lot of the high frequencies out of the microphone.
So there are like different like modes to like how strong the wind is basically.
That's it. So if I'm outside, it's not a windy day, I'm going Zeppelin. If I'm inside, I'm just using the black foam on the end of the microphone. Also, like I said, every ounce counts. I really am going to make a t-shirt with that.
Yeah, that seems really heavy.
Done. Look for me on Etsy.
And I also wanted to ask, what type of microphone would you suggest if you're like doing a YouTube style video?
You're doing a YouTube style video. Actually, do you mind if I circle back around to that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you. Let me ask you this. What are you shooting with?
I switch between my phone and my camera, but my camera does have a microphone thing.
Is it like a DSLR camera? Or is
mirrorless. I have a Canon RP.
Oh, sweet. I just got an M50. I love it.
I was getting that, but lens choices are like expensive.
What'd you say, lens prices?
Yeah, are expensive.
There's third-party lenses you should definitely look at. Way cheaper. Yeah, I'm not paying that kind of money unless it's on sale on Amazon. So I'll address that. I actually have something to address that specifically. So again, the microphones we're worried about: dynamic mic, dynamic mic, condenser mic, shotgun mic. Those are your best options. So let me get this back up here. So the reason they're important also is polar patterns. This I'm just going to hit really quickly. You can see from the graph, this shows if the microphone was pointing up, this shows how it picks up. So dynamic mics are typically a cardioid pattern. It's called that because it's kind of shaped like a heart. It's more like a heart, less like a butt. So cardioid, there's versions of the cardioid that also can pick up from behind. There's particular reasons of physics reasons of why you would want to pick up from behind the microphone. Those ribbon microphones we talked about, they're going to pick up in that figure 8 pattern. They actually pick up equally on both sides. And the shotgun, you can see when you look at that shotgun, that's why that's the key on set. That's the guy. It's also really going to be great outside for ambient noise because of the way it kind of tails off as it comes to the center. It's not going to be this really abrupt where it only picks up from the front. It picks up from the sides as well. Next is a field recorder. This is, all right, so you got the microphone. What are you going to record it with? I'm getting ahead of myself. What are you going to record it with? So this I'm going to do really quickly. So field recorder. I have my field recorder here. So we saw this in one of the pictures, right? This is a Zoom field recorder, not too expensive. You don't need this. This was necessary for the work that I do because I need to be able to capture multiple microphones at the same time and have separate files for all of them. Also, as we call out takes, scenes, takes, and shots, I'm labeling them in here so that all I'm doing is handing an SD card over to the director and the editor at the end of the shooting day. Actually, usually midday. We dump it constantly. So this has inputs for multiple microphones, multiple outputs. So I have a system that lets me split it. I get the headphone feed. The other two go over to the directors. We call it Video Village. It's usually a tent set up with a digital monitor so the director can see everything that's happening on set. I have the ability to adjust my input levels so that nothing distorts. For any of you guys keeping an actual numerical count, minus 12 dB is the place you want to be. Okay, there's another t-shirt. Minus 12 dB is the place to be because every ounce counts.
Along with editing, so say you put a project into Premiere, should it be at negative 12 dB also?
That's where you want to be when you capture, because that means you have what's called headroom, right? So when I was talking earlier about something that's captured too low, as soon as you bring it up, you start getting all that noise, like bad room noise. Minus 12 dB roughly gives you enough headroom that when you turn it up, you're not going to get that. It's all about avoiding noise. We want to keep it as clean as possible. Also, an easier way to do it is if you don't want to think about 12 dB, typically you have green lights, yellow lights, red. You want to be in the top green, just kind of kissing on the yellow. That's a good place to be. You don't want to be too far below that. You definitely don't want to be over top of that because, again, you're cooked at that point. So field recorders come in all shapes and sizes. You don't need them. Most importantly is if you're not looking at this as some kind of a future investment, there's ways to do all of this with your phone or a tablet or a laptop, you name it. Like I said, necessity is the mother of invention. So when you need to get something done, how are you going to do it? So really quickly, we get all those sounds. There's multiple ways to work with these things once we have them captured. Me being a music and audio guy, I tend to work in what's called a DAW, which is a digital audio workstation. Here's some examples. I'm a Logic Pro guy. I've been using Logic for, almost 20 years, long before Apple ever owned them. Logic is an Apple-only product, but comes with just about everything you could possibly need to do just about anything. And it also works with video files. Those earlier screenshots of the musical mock-up that was in Logic. Cubase.
You don't use Adobe Audition at all?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're running out of time. I was actually hoping to show, actually, let me do it real quick. I have in the past used Audition. I've moved away from it. Look at that. See, you're ahead of me. Were you looking at my notes? So there's Audition, there's DaVinci Resolve. This is the app that my production team works in now. So whereas we used to work in Premiere and Audition, I would do all my work in Logic, move it over to Audition and do my final mix in Audition. With DaVinci Resolve, the director and the editor can work all in Resolve, and I can as well. So I get a hard drive that's got everything. I open it up. There's an app built in called Fairlight that lets me do all my audio work for mixing. It's fantastic and it's free. There is a paid version. I really can't even figure out, other than the video editing, there's definitely there's some back end changes with the video editing. So what are we doing when we edit sound? We're trimming the length. We're cutting out unnecessary audio. Those ums, ahs, pops, all those weird sounds, and even things that just don't need to be there. We're also making sure that it's synced with whatever the video edit has. We're editing in parts from other clips if there's a better version of it, adjusting timing, removing noise, and mixing. Those are all the things we're doing. And then let me see if I can do this. Oops, real quick, because I definitely want to give you guys some time for questions. I was told by my friend I had too much stuff. Can you guys see Audition? Okay, so this is an example. You can see there's multiple tracks. I have the film down in the bottom left-hand corner. I work on a multi-monitor system, so I would typically have the film on another monitor. But we have everything from dialogue for one character, dialogue for another character, dialogue for a third character, and then a place where they all meet. So I have a single volume for all of them. Here's all my Foley. Here's all my sound effects, which is mostly ambient. And then my music, pink noise. you're not sure what that is, pink noise is the sound of every audio frequency happening at one time. I use this to set my volume level in the room. So, and just so you can see, here's the mixer. And all of these things are going at the same time. Coolio. All right, so walking the walk. How do we make this happen without spending all of our inheritance? Microphones. Here's just some examples. So I showed you $100 and probably a $200 version of a dynamic microphone. Here's a lower version, 40 bucks. So if you want to make a movie, you need to capture sound. Don't buy a boom pole. Don't buy an expensive microphone. Although if you look all the way to the other side, you can see you can get a very similar shotgun mic for $30. But don't buy a boom pole. Just steal a broom handle from around the house. Duct tape it to it. Even better, gaff tape. Gaff tape doesn't leave glue. You can see 40 bucks can get you a microphone. A dynamic, a condenser you can get for 35. This is Nady's a pretty good name at this price point. So you can get a Nady shotgun and be up and rolling. Some other options. This is what I was talking about as far as you were mentioning YouTube videos. These are great options for YouTube videos. You could use these on a film, absolutely. If you want to tape your smartphone to a broomstick and hold it over somebody's head, you can absolutely do it. It's just going to be really difficult to monitor sound. But again, hey, if that's what you got to get done, that's what you got to get done. You do what you have to. But you can see there's options for, we talked about shotgun microphones. The first and the left and the right ends of this are both miniature shotgun mics. One is one that attaches to smartphones. The one on the end can attach to a smartphone, but it also has something called a soft shoe mount, which is what would work on digital cameras. So that is your starting point. If you're a talking head in your YouTube video, you could also consider the second one from the left, which is a lavalier, not too expensive, and it plugs directly into your phone or tablet. This is an iPhone version. But they make Android versions too. It's all essentially the same. That's where I would start. I would say when your YouTube channel starts making money, you start upgrading all of this stuff. You get a nice boom mic and a boom stand, and you hang it over your head out of shot. And then you could even use a lavalier to catch just in case. But again, the boom's always going to sound better because it sounds like you're in a room and not, in somebody's head.
Do you still recommend the small Shure? I mean, yeah, not the Shure one, the boomstick for $30 for like YouTube style videos? Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that runs on you can put a AA battery in it.
How would you pop it up?
I would probably look for an inexpensive mic stand if you could. If not, again, whatever you find laying around the house. Is there a spare piece of wood? So like I said, necessity is the mother of invention, but also perfection is the enemy of done. If you wait for the perfect situation, you're never getting anything done. It's all about making something and then seeing how you can do it better and keep growing. If you never do because you never feel like you have the right stuff, then you have nothing to build on. How do you get that into your device? If we're talking about phones, this is a thing called an iRig by a company called IK Multimedia. $40, you can plug that microphone directly in, and then it goes right to your Apple or Android phone. I believe they even make a version of this that does both types of mobile devices and then also has a computer connection to it. It's like the next model up. So clearly it's one microphone at a time, but I don't know if you guys can see there's a switch on the top. It says 48 volts. So if you had something like this and you had that Nady shotgun microphone or something else that needs power, this will send that power to it too. All right, so I mentioned Logic, that's $200. Cubase is, I think, $400 or $500. Pro Tools is a monthly subscription that's obscene. You don't need it. you have a Mac, you get GarageBand for free. If you're on Windows, Audacity is a free app. It's been around for ages. Totally free. Does tons of stuff. From a music and audio perspective, Reaper is phenomenal. I would even put Reaper above Audacity, and I believe Reaper is available on Windows and Apple. Free. I think there's some things that you can pay for, but you don't need to. Comes with a ton of stuff, and it's open source, but people are constantly making stuff for it. All right, so then I said I have resources. I'm skipping the resources. I want to know, what kind of questions do we have?
I guess since you're really good at like creating sound and stuff like that. So for a person that has never like really created sound, whether it's for a film, a video, or something like that, whether you use like GarageBand, Audacity, or Reaper, like where do you start? Or like since the tools can like kind of look confusing and stuff.
So if this was when I was growing up, I would say get your hands on whatever you can afford, and then twist every knob, click every button. And I'm a weirdo. I always say read the manual, which I know upsets a lot of people. But that's what I would typically say. In this day and age, pick your platform, look on YouTube. That is your best place, right? YouTube's an amazing resource that I wish that was around ages ago. That's why people are, young folks are getting to be really skilled really fast because, I'm a teacher as well. YouTube has two features that I don't have as a teacher, and that's a pause button and a rewind button. So in fact, there's a third one. You could change the speed if you want to too. So if you can't quite make out what somebody did, you can slow it down. So that's what I would say. Pick your platform, start on YouTube, and use the platform as kind of a guide for the things to learn, but also realize that that's going to take you other places. When you talk about audio, you're talking about how do you capture it? And how you capture it isn't just about pointing a microphone at something. Sometimes you got to get your head in there physically and see what's the best place. Where does it sound the best? And that's where you put the microphone. The more you do that, the less work you have to do on the back end. We live in an era where everybody's fix it in post, fix it in the mix. It's garbage. When you have to do that for a living, you hate life. That's not fun. When you have something that just comes together and feels good, that's because the time was taken up front to do it. After that, once you have it captured, how do you make it better? EQ. So adjusting those frequencies, the low frequencies, the mid frequencies, the upper frequencies, so that things sound good. Learning about what frequencies build and what frequencies compete. Low frequencies build and turn into mud. High frequencies steal space away from each other. So where can you cut that away from things? And then editing and space. So understanding how reverbs, delays, modulation effects, all that stuff. So I would say start with the platform, see what kind of stuff's in the platform, and then when you say, what is that? Go look that up and start digging into it. And if you have any interest in really basic physics and mathematics, you don't have to do this, but it's kind of cool because I like physics, I like math. I can typically call frequencies out. So if I hear something that doesn't sound right, I typically know what frequency it is by the pitch. So, and that's just because I kind of like that stuff, and it makes my work faster because I can call that out. So is that a good answer? Awesome. What suggestions do you have for editing a podcast?
Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, it's Jill.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, hi, Jill.
Hi. Listen, this has been awesome. I just want to say it was supposed to end at 11:50. If people can stay on, we have no sessions at noon. So if people want to stay on and you have the time to answer questions, that's great. But if people need to go, by all means, just go do what you need to do. But thank you so much for staying on and for answering the questions, because obviously people have a lot. It
was my pleasure. I lost track of time.
That's good.
So yeah, if you have to go, thanks for hanging out. Jill does have my my contact information. So if you have more questions, you can send them to me. if anybody wants to hang out and ask a couple more questions, you are free to. I'll stick around for a few minutes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You know what? I'm just going to run down these real quick so that they're recorded in the video, but there's some good ones. Do you have any recommendations to improve audio for film, such as dialogue and background noise? I'm gonna send my list of resources out so that everybody has access to them. There might even be some links. If there's not links, I might just add links to it to make it really easy. There are tools that you can get your hands on for mobile devices, phones, and tablets. There's also computer versions of those applications that strip noise. Same thing, if you don't have to do it, it's always going to be better, because wherever the noise lives, something important lives too. And when you pull the noise out, you're taking that out too. As for me, I use an app called iZotope. It's called iZotope RX. It's a phenomenal product, but the day that I don't have to use it is a really good day. It's always about how can you isolate and not have to deal with that stuff. So if you're filming somewhere with an air conditioner, shut it off and sweat, or find a way to cover it up. Yeah, film sets aren't fun in that way. There's no air conditioning in Hollywood. Should use different mics throughout a film. Boom mics are typically all the same, absolutely. The cool thing about that boom mic, I don't know if you noticed, this whole setup, this is actually a handle. So when I'm going out to get sound effects, this comes off the boom stand and I hold it with a handle. This does the bulk of my work, but definitely condenser microphones get hidden off camera, and lavalier mics go when necessary. But we watched a clip in the first portion where you could hear all this rustling up against the microphone, and that's not usable. So that's one of the reasons we don't use lavaliers a lot. Good practice for audio compression and EQ. Less is more. Less is absolutely more. So the first thing about both of them is understanding what they actually do and what their purpose is. For EQ, if you can find an EQ that shows an audio graph of what it's seeing, and then even better, if you can find an EQ that when you make changes to it, it shows what the changes do, even better, so you can see. There's frequencies that live within a certain space, and adjusting them is going to cause either havoc or fix problems. You can't change the tone of something with EQ. You can only change the space it takes up. And compression is definitely less is more. A compressor is something that's trying to listen for something, and when it gets too high, it smacks it down. And if it's audible, it's not good. I could talk for hours on compression. Let me just see if there's anything else that was worth mentioning. How do you record for surround sound? Whew, that's a good one too. If I was recording for surround sound, if I was actually recording for it, I would use a 5-microphone system, but that's not how it works. Surround sound is going to be the addition of multiple sources put into one, and then you're going to use an app like Audition or any of those other apps that allow you to take those multiple sound sources, put them wherever you want. And oh man, people are obsessed with compressors. When should you use a compressor, an autogator, and expander? For film, a little bit of compression to make sure all the dialogue's kind of sitting at the same place. A little bit, shouldn't be audible, very little bit. Autogate, never. Just take the time and edit your clips. An autogate's never going to be as smart as you are, and it's never going to have access to the script. You should. Or an expander. So an expander is a compression the opposite direction. I don't use expanders for film. I only use them for audio.
I think Eddie's thinking music. I think Eddie might be thinking music.
Oh, so Eddie might be thinking music specifically. So when should you use a compressor? When you look at a waveform, when you look at the image of a waveform, you see it has a peak. Actually, I guess I'll do it this way. A peak, and then it comes down. The peak is called a transient. That's the first thing that our ear perceives. If you look in really close, you'll notice there's sound before the transient, but there's that peak and then it comes down. So the point of a compressor is to take those peaks and knock them down so that you can bring the overall volume up. What happens is if you have something set too drastic and too fast, it's going to suck. You're going to actually feel it and hear it. So it can be used a little bit over drums to make the whole thing kind of come together. Can be used if you have a drummer that's not terribly skilled. It can be a way of evening out, especially if you're doing pop music or R&B, hip hop, anything like that, and you're using a real drummer and their hits are all over the place. It's a way to level those. I'll use a little bit of compression across almost everything just to kind of give me a little bit of control if everything's too wild, but I tend to do it when I record in, so I don't have to do it later. Real compressors react differently than artificial ones. Auto gate would be a really noisy guitar, or if you record a full band in a room and you're getting bleed from other instruments, I might use an auto gate. Again, I would probably automate that myself because it's always going to be better and more natural. And an expander, again, I don't typically use an expander, so that's I'm going to bring the lowest parts out to closer meet the transients. I can't think of any times when I've really needed that. Expander to me is repair. So hopefully if it's recorded right, you don't have to do that. Oh, you asked for my email address. That should be, they can share that with you. You can also go, my website's keithgiosa.com. You can contact me through there too. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll put that on our website too with the session. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. You can share that and my email address. I'm more than happy to answer questions. The resources that I have is documentaries, books, a lot of the items that we talked about at various price levels, and then other places to go to learn more. I think that's everything, huh?
Yeah, you hit a lot. Polar patterns, condenser, ribbon, etc. Yeah, you mic types, etc. You hit a lot in this session.
That's why I wanted to break it out into two also, because if you don't understand why it started, you're not going to understand why we have the tools that we have.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I missed the first one. I was in a different session, so I'm trying to grasp, but it's a lot of information that I missed in the first part.
Yeah, so
Go back and look at these videos too, because they'll be posted. That's a really good thing to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to do. You know, at my school, we do video, film, graphic design and stuff like that. But I'm also trying to see ways to incorporate sound in a way that makes sense. But I'm not like a musician and I don't know how to create those things. So it's like starting off, it's like, how do I even like, for example, a whole nother thing you also have to think about is licensing and like copyright and stuff like that. So I'm just like, how can I create my own sounds, like chill music to put in the background of my music without potentially being copyrighted? And it's like that whole thing, but then things cost money that I don't have. And like you said, necessity is the source of invention. So it's like, I'm just trying to figure out how do I like learn how to make like beats and stuff like that. I don't know what to say.
Do you have a computer?
Yes.
Is it a Windows or Mac?
I have a Mac.
You have a Mac. You got GarageBand. Use those loops. Those loops are those loops have your name on them. There's some slight fundamental music things that you have to learn, like tempo, and you know what it does and how to adjust it. You might want to mess around with keys a little bit. Otherwise, everything in GarageBand is going to be in the key of C. But yeah, and it's like cooking without ever having tasted food. You literally just drag stuff in and see if you like it. If you don't, delete and start over again. And everything in GarageBand, you don't have to worry about licenses. It's all fair use. There was a question that I didn't get a chance to address, which I forgot about. I know there was a question about license-free. As soon as you start getting into copyright law, things get really hairy. I had a discussion before this session because I initially had the intent of sharing a lot of clips from online to demonstrate things. And even though it's educational, it counts as fair use. So nobody has to pay royalties. The problem is YouTube is governed by a computer and not a person. So it doesn't know when it's an educational thing, even when you put educational and fair use in the description. It'll sometimes still give you a strike. And then a strike means, well, now you have to dispute it. And if you lose the dispute, they shut your channel down. So I think I'm a nice guy. I don't want to do that to anybody. So I try to refrain from anything that could possibly fall into that. So copyright gets really weird. On the other side of copyright, as soon as you take an idea and commit it to anything, like you take an idea and put it together on your computer, it's committed to a media, it's copyrighted. It's your right. Nobody else has it. So it's an interesting thing. I try to steer as far away from that topic as I could, because that's a rabbit hole. But definitely just experiment. That's the best thing you can do. It's like, again, I'm Italian. I always go to the kitchen. So try and put that ingredient in. If it tastes bad, you'll never do it again. And that's the way we learn. We learn more from negative impact than we do from positive impact. So don't be afraid of the negative. Just go for it and do it. That's still, I mean, I've been doing this for decades. I still do that to this day. The films that I have on my schedule right now, every one I'm trying to find something that I've never done before, and I hope it fails. So I can figure out what failed about it and then redo it. Don't be afraid of failure. That's where we grow. Cool. Anything else from anybody?
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
Reverb, I've gone a lot into compression and a lot into equalization, but reverb's always been something that I've never really like. I use Audition. And
Okay.
There's so many different things that you can change with reverb. No idea like how to use each one. I just want to know like, basically how to use reverb to enhance like your dialogue or like your room tone, like or to like achieve a certain effect.
I'm sorry, say the last part again. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. How would you like use reverb to like enhance your dialogue or like your room tone or to like achieve like a certain effect?
So it depends on the scene, clearly. And it also depends on how it was recorded. If I'm deferring to the boom mic, chances are pretty good I probably don't need reverb, unless when we listen back, it feels isolated. If it does, I'm going to try and open it up, because you don't want the audience to feel like they're trapped in a box, right? So we want to give them space. So if it's a room, I want to make sure the room feels big. The other thing too is it's weird, it gets into minutia. There's no real specific answer to this. If I'm on a set that's tiny and it's supposed to feel huge, which is often the case, especially when you're on a budget, the sets feel much bigger on screen than they are in real life. If I want it to feel like this cafeteria is gigantic, I'm probably going to use a reverb that reflects that. The first thing as far as using reverbs in any case, whether it's music, film, anytime, 9 times out of 10, you are not going to put a reverb on the channel you're affecting. So if I have dialogue, I'm not going to put a reverb on each dialogue track. That reverb is going to eat up your computer in seconds. So I'm going to create what's called a bus or an auxiliary track and send those tracks to that reverb. What's really nice is if I do that, I can decide how much of that track goes to the reverb. That's the first thing. Always consolidate, use as few reverbs as possible. And then you need to determine what reverb fits the room you're trying to capture or the space you're trying to capture. If it's an announcer at a big stadium, you're probably going to have a lot of something called pre-delay, which means you're going to hear the I have to remember, pre-delay I believe means you hear the reflection first and then the actual sound source, right? It sounds like a delay, but it's the reverb. So you hear the reverb first and then you hear the natural, it's actually delaying the natural source. So the longer that pre-delay, the bigger the space is going to feel. There's a threshold, it's going to start feeling weird, but there's things like that. Also depends on what kind of reverb it is. Is it a digital reverb that's trying to use ones and zeros to approximate what something sounds like? Or is it I'm trying to think of what they're called. There's another type of reverb that I just completely, it was there and then it left. There's another type of reverb that uses, they actually send a tone out in the space. So if I was in Abbey Road Studios and I want to create a reverb that sounds like that, I can send a tone in that room and record it and then create a reverb that sounds like that room. That's oftentimes a really good type of reverb to use because you can pick out by what kind of space it is. So if I need it to sound like a cabin, I can choose cabin from the list. If I need it to sound like a stadium, there's probably a stadium or a cathedral or any of those things. And then the last piece of it is how much. If you can hear it and feel it and really know it's there, it's too much. As soon as you hear it and as soon as it's like in your conscious, it's too much. Back it off and back it off by about a dB or 2 at a time. The other thing is EQing your reverbs. That's the one thing nobody tells you. In music, film, everything. Every time you use a reverb, you got to EQ it. You don't need reverb blasting on every frequency. You can cut a lot of the highs and oftentimes a lot of the lows because that's just going to create rumble unless you want rumble. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, actually, thank you. Yeah, it helped out a lot. Also, that was my next question too. With the buttons on Audition, how do you make those?
Ooh.
How do you make reverb?
No, how do you
make a bus?
Buses?
How do you make a bus? And I just remembered the type of reverb I was thinking of is an impulse response reverb. That's what they're called. That's completely different class. How do you make a bus in Audition? So it's funny. I haven't used Audition in so long. Are you, Eddie? Are you on a Mac or on a Windows machine?
I'm on a Windows right now.
Okay. All right. So it looks like it should be under multi-track and then track, and there's an add mono bus and an add stereo bus and an add 5/1 bus.
Gotcha. Okay.
So so multi-track, track, and then
What is reverb? I mean, I've seen it in like music and videos and stuff like that, but I don't technically know what reverb does and what's the purpose of it.
So most of these industries are full of people that are really, really impatient. So we shorten things. So we talked about stuff like ADR, VO. I'm sure there was a couple other in there. So I'm going to classify both of these. EQ and reverb are both shorter words for what they really are. EQ stands for equalization. How do you equalize frequencies within a band, right? So reverb stands for reverberation. And essentially what it is when you're in a space, every space has a sense of reverb. So if you were to go into a quiet space and clap, you'll hear the sound of your clap reverberate or bounce off the walls and come back to you. It's not quite a delay. Delays are longer and is really just a repetition of a sound, whereas a reverb is bouncing off walls and surfaces, and then the sound changes based on those surfaces. So what a reverb does in the work that we do is it tries to recreate the sound of that, right? So if you have a tile bathroom, there's going to be a reverb that sounds like a tile bathroom. And if you think about what a bathroom sounds like, it's kind of tinny, almost hurts your fingers if it's loud in a bathroom because of all those really hard, shiny surfaces. And the sound bounces off the walls and comes back to you really quickly.
So then how does that play in a song? Like, for example, some edits that people do is like of a song, but then they'll slow it down and reverb it.
So two different things. Slowing it down, a lot of these DAWs allow you to take something, and essentially what they do is they take audio, they slice it into tiny chunks, and then they spread it open or they compress it. So if you spread it open, and sometimes when you do that, if you make it go slower, the pitch goes down, sounds lower, right? If you make it go faster, the pitch goes up. Some don't, depends on how they're doing it algorithmically. So that's the first thing they're doing. And then reverb is just taken for a remix, unless you're working with the artist and you have all the tracks. Like if it's a professional remix, they're probably working with the artist and have the original tracks and they can do different things to it. If you're remixing a mixed track, You're just putting more reverb over top of it and trying to make it feel like it's a different space. When you add reverb, it's always going to make the space bigger though. I shouldn't say you can't make, there's things called deverbs, but again, just like noise reduction, you're always going to take out something you want when you take out the stuff you don't want. It's just glued together. That's what a mix is. So, good question.
Good stuff.
Cool.
Thank
I'm
you
still
all.
a bit confused, but that was really
What, with the remix thing?
no, just with reverb and I mean, just I guess in sound in general is something that I'm learning and I don't really have a grasp on it. So it's like a lot of information that just came within the past hour and a half.
It's really helpful to play with this, right? I mean, if you take some sound and you pull it into an audition or something like that, and there's a reverb effect you can add to things, and how much of it, you'll be able to hear the difference in those different sound replications. That's the best way to learn it, is literally just apply it.
Absolutely. It took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah, and discussions like this are tough because levels of experience and knowledge are always so varied. So that's why when I was asked to do this, I wanted to do it as a two-part where we kind of talk about history and vocabulary, and then we start talking about how do you apply it. And this way, the second half, this is not to make you feel bad about not being at the first half, but this is so that you understand why the things in the second half exist because of the things in the first half. And with everybody's varying levels of understanding, you could either go down the rabbit hole of let's discuss what a compressor is and how it works and where it came from and why. I mean, most audio tools came from military use, military and radio, and usually military radios. That's, you know, like some of the earliest stuff in the 50s and 60s, they would take military gear and modify it and throw it in a studio. And what was the purpose of it? Like, compressors serve a purpose over radio. You don't want things to distort. You don't want things too quiet. You want everybody to be at a consistent level. So radios had compressors for years, still does. That's a whole other discussion about if you're making music, how much do you compress if it's going to a radio station? Because they're going to compress it more. It's going to sound terrible. So all these parts, first you have to understand that there's this thing called a compressor, and then you need to learn, well, what's the job of a compressor? Okay, and then what are the pieces, the buttons, the switches, the knobs on the compressor that make the compressor be a compressor? And then how does it work? And a lot of times, no description is going to do it for you, even analogies. I mean, I've heard people talk about, like, again, as a compressor, I've heard people talk about it like you're in your car with your mom and you keep touching the radio volume and she keeps smacking your hand. That's the compressor. Like, that's good, really broad thinking, but it doesn't tell you how a compressor works. There's so much, I don't say this to scare anybody, there's so much more tiny little pieces about things like that. I think the fact that there is all this other information is fun because it means you're never going to have to stop learning. Like, when you stop learning, it's boredom. So it's great that, like, you know, you start learning about, there's optical compressors, there's, you know, all of these different compressors, they work on different electrical bases. Reverbs, there's digital reverbs that cost $6,000 and $10,000, and then there's a reverb pedal you can buy for a guitar that'll cost you $50, right? And what's the difference? Because they're essentially doing the same thing in different ways. So like it was said, open up Audition, throw something in there, and then literally just one thing at a time, right? Again, if you're making that dish, don't just throw everything in the pantry in, because you're not going to know what screwed it up.
So like,
right?
when you're making a beat, like, what would you like? Would you just like this, a guitar example for, so you would just put like, just test things out and just try to create something, and then
So if you're trying to make music for your YouTube show, and you're thinking about YouTube show, geez, how old do I sound? Your YouTube channel, no judging, and you're thinking guitar is like, that's going to stick out to me the most. I know there's going to be some kind of a drum beat and the bass and all these other things, but the guitar is really important. We're going to start with that. Get a guitar, and again, I would start this in GarageBand, because you can just pull in loops. Go through sample the guitars, find which one you like, drop it in, make it a loop. Try and put the bass, and while the guitar's there, go into the effects section, see what you can do with it. And GarageBand now is insane with what it does. It used to be all about plugins, and it's not about plugins now. Now it's about how can you manipulate with other things, and a lot of it's been taken from hip hop, house, drum and bass, all that stuff. They use filters and EQ to do crazy things, or they break it up where the music's these tiny little square pieces and it sounds like it's like a machine gun. All those tools are in GarageBand. And man, if you have GarageBand on an iPhone or an iPad, you can do it just by shaking the thing around, right? And you can discover, and literally you can do it by moving it around, and you can discover what each one of those tools does sonically, and then see if you can figure out what it's doing literally. How's it doing that? Why is it doing it? What's the effect? And then don't ever forget, how's it make you feel? If it makes you feel bad, turn it off. Get rid of it. Does that help?
Yes, a lot.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of resources out there too with YouTube and everything else. Just start is the most important thing. Open up the application, start a new timeline or whatever, and just start dragging things in and playing. And then when you have a question, pop into YouTube and ask the question. You'll figure it out.
And you'll have my contact information. If you have something you can't find, I'll help you find it, or I'll tell you what it is.
Oh, yeah, I literally searched up your website so I can. But yeah, I guess the first thing for me is even like having good sound with my camera with like background noise, because one thing I would do, like for example, if you're filming outside in their cars and things like that, is just the, all that. So I would try to like noise reduce, but like similar to what you said, I didn't think about before. If you take out something you don't want, it also is going to take out something you want, because when I would do that, then it'll kind of sound distorted a bit if I put it too much. And it's like, how do you like bury it and make sure it's fine?
So I worked as an audio engineer for a long time. I worked out of my own house and I worked in a couple studios, and typically what I would do is I would just throw mics all over the place. I know it's supposed to go somewhere around here, and I would just record. And then in the mix process, I would spend so much time. Now consider, let's take this out of the fun zone and put it in the work zone. So if I'm getting paid a certain amount of money, the more hours it takes me to do it, the less I'm getting paid, right? So I don't want to be stuck in that place. So what happened was I partnered with a friend of mine who is also an engineer. In fact, I was doing session work for him. I was called in by a client to come in and play a couple different instruments on an album. And he was literally on his hands and knees, listening to the drum kit, listening to the acoustic guitar, listening to all these constituent parts. And after the session, I said, "What were you doing?" Like, what? And he said, "Well, this is my microphone. If I know where this is," and I'm part of a gigantic group of engineers on Facebook called Move the Mics, which is, rather than thinking you can fix it with EQ and anything else later, just get it right the first time, because it makes the end of the process not only faster but fun. The things that you don't have to fix with the pandemic, we're all doing sorts of things to like be closer to our friends and family, feel like we're still creating. So I work with a lot of artists that I play with live, and we're creating music by everybody records at home, and it's all coming to me and I have to mix it. It's fun and I like the problem solving of it, but you realize that like, wow, that's a bad room to be recording in. Like, wow, okay, so I have to fix that. So now I do have to deverb. And now because she's singing and playing guitar at the same time, I need to figure out, I can't take one out of the other. I need to figure out how to make those two tracks play well together, and you still hear the guitar and you still hear the voice. So there's a fun problem solving aspect, and because it's my time, I'm not upset of how long it takes. But if I was doing that right, I would be telling people, no, don't put it there. Make sure the vocal microphone's pointing up, the guitar microphone's pointing down, and they're polar opposites, so they block each other out. And then I don't have to deal with that stuff. So it's the same thing in your situation. If you're contending with planes, trains, and automobiles, then you either need to find a new space in the house. Again, don't spend money, but find a new space in the house that's maybe a little bit more controllable, or find a way to control the space that you have. Blankets do a lot more than people give them credit for. Even a blanket just over a window. I don't know if you can see, like I have some sound padding up on my walls, and when I clap, I was shocked. I've been in this house for 3 months. I'm in a bedroom until I can build a studio on site. I was shocked how well this stuff did what it needed to do. And when I did a graph of the room, it was almost completely flat. So I barely had to do anything. This stuff you can buy in packs of like 6 sheets of this insulation. It's called rock wool. You can get that for like $80, and you just cover it in some kind of cloth. put it up on the wall. You don't even need to like hang it with anything. You can literally just put a nail and just push it on and it'll stick. Stuff like that stops the reflections off the wall. If I have to record in here, I throw stuff over the windows. Anything that you could do to control the environment. And then you were asking about a microphone. Those shotgun microphones, even if it's on your Canon, at least it's pointing at you. So that's going to do better. The closer that microphone is to you, the less the room you're going to hear. Lavalier is going to sound the closest, but sometimes that's too close. Maybe that's, you know, but that's the thing. Try and control your environment first. And then hopefully you don't have to do this stuff on the back end.
Keith,
Always
I
gonna
got to
help.
jump into a meeting. Any other final questions or unless Jason wants to take over, I think, does that answer it pretty much? Good.
Cool.
Super. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the extra participation. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah,
Appreciate
this
your
was
work
wonderful.
today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm thrilled to have been a part of it. And I look forward to hearing from some folks with some more information.
A lot of fun. Great stuff. Thank you.